Imagine knowing exactly which hour a storm will hit your neighborhood, like 2 weeks from now. Not an educated guess, a complete certainty.
Right, or imagine knowing exactly which crop fields will get rain and precisely when a thick blanket of fog will roll over a major highway. It sounds almost like a superpower.
Yeah, or maybe a scene from some sci-fi movie where humanity lives under a controlled glass dome.
Yeah.
But right now, India is actually spending a massive 2,000 crore rupee budget to make that exact scenario a reality.
They are. That budget is funding an initiative called Mission Mausam. And the objective isn't just about, putting a slightly better forecast on your smartphone.
No, definitely not.
It's an overarching strategy that was launched to completely rewire how a nation of over 1 billion people interacts with the atmosphere. I mean, the stated goal is to transform India into a weather-ready and climate-smart nation.
Which is just a massive paradigm shift. I mean, if you're listening to this in a city, you might just think, oh, great, I won't get caught in the rain on my commute.
Right, the convenience factor.
Exactly. But we're exploring this in our deep dive today because this initiative, which is spearheaded by the Ministry of Earth Sciences and launched by Prime Minister Modi on the 150th anniversary of the India Meteorological Department, it's really about national security and economic survival.
Yeah, it absolutely is. To understand the sheer scale of this, we have to look at the structural vulnerabilities that the government is actually trying to solve here.
Right.
The strategic framework identifies three massive pillars driving this overhaul. So you have the agrarian economy, disaster preparedness, and rural development. We're moving away from treating weather as a daily inconvenience and treating it as a critical variable in macroeconomic stability.
Let's start with the baseline problem, though,
Yeah.
because we already have satellites, right? The IMD has been tracking the monsoon for over a century. Why drop 2,000 crore right now to overhaul the whole system? It feels, I don't know, like replacing a perfectly working engine.
Well, the problem is that the engine isn't working anymore because the terrain has fundamentally changed. We've relied on historical weather patterns for decades.
Right.
But climate change has severely disrupted that baseline. We're seeing immense volatility now. And for the agrarian economy, which employs a massive portion of the Indian workforce, that volatility is, well, it's existential.
Yeah, because if you're a farmer, an accurate monsoon forecast basically dictates your entire year. You need to know precisely when to plant your seeds.
Exactly.
If the rain is late and the seeds just die in the ground, that doesn't just ruin one farmer's livelihood. That creates this huge ripple effect of food shortages and inflation across the entire country. You can't rely on the traditional farmer's almanac anymore because climate change has basically scrambled all the data.
And that scrambling of data connects directly to the second pillar, which is disaster preparedness. I mean, we're witnessing an increasing frequency of extreme weather
Like
events.
the cyclones and flash floods.
Cyclones, flash floods, sudden intense droughts, yeah. If you can push your prediction window out further and increase its accuracy, you shift the entire country from a reactive state to a proactive one.
Wow, yeah.
It's the difference between trying to evacuate a coastal town, say, 2 hours before a cyclone makes landfall, versus mobilizing emergency services 2 whole days before.
That's huge. Think of the old forecasting method, like taking a blurry photograph of the entire country once a day.
Yeah.
Mission Mausam is trying to upgrade that to a 4K live video stream zooming in on every single zip code.
That is a really accurate way to visualize it, actually.
We're essentially trying to build an economic radar system for the country.
Yeah, and that high-resolution data feeds right into the third pillar, rural development. Better weather services fundamentally change how local governments manage water resources and plan infrastructure.
Makes sense.
Knowing a flood is imminent means you have the lead time to move livestock to higher ground. Or knowing a severe dry spell is coming means you can conserve reservoir water weeks in advance. That protects both drinking supplies and agriculture.
Okay, so we need this 4K live video stream of the atmosphere. But how are we actually building that? Because looking at the blueprints for this rollout in the sources, it feels like flipping through some military technology catalog.
It really does.
We've got Doppler weather radars, automatic weather stations, and these next-generation satellites being deployed all across the country.
Right, so to get that high-resolution output, you need a quantum leap in data collection. Let's just look at the Doppler weather radars for a second. Traditional weather radars essentially bounce a radio wave off a cloud and tell you, yes, there is a mass of water out there.
Okay.
But a Doppler radar goes a step further. It uses the Doppler effect, which is the exact same physics that makes a police siren change pitch as it speeds past you, to track the actual movement of the water droplets within the cloud.
Oh, wow. So you're not just seeing that a storm exists, you're tracking its internal velocity. You know exactly which direction the rain is moving and how fast the winds inside the storm are rotating. But wait, if you're deploying these advanced radars and automatic weather stations all over the subcontinent, the sheer volume of data pouring in must be astronomical. Like, a human meteorologist can't sit there and parse millions of wind speed and humidity readings in real time.
No, they absolutely cannot, which is why the hardware rollout is really just the collection mechanism. The core intelligence of Mission Mausam relies on high-performance computing.
Oh, yeah.
The government is deploying supercomputers, specifically these systems named Partouche and Mahir, and they're tasked with ingesting petabytes of this raw environmental data. They pair that data with artificial intelligence and machine learning to build advanced Earth system models.
Okay, so this is where we get into what the sources call better temporal and spatial sampling, which is really just a fancy meteorologist's way of saying they want to know the weather more often and for much smaller areas.
Pretty much, yeah.
Instead of a broad alert saying expect rain in the state tomorrow, the AI crunches the numbers to say expect heavy rain on your specific street at 2:00 p.m.
Yeah, and that hyperlocal focus is what the initiative terms last mile prediction. The ultimate goal here is to deliver actionable forecasts all the way down to the panchayat level, so the village council level, with a lead time of 10 to 15 days.
That's crazy. A single village knowing 15 days in advance what the weather will do is mind-blowing.
Mm.
But on the flip side of that 15-day window, there's also a massive push for improving the nowcast, right?
Yes, the nowcasts. Those are short-term emergency alerts for severe, rapidly developing weather. Currently, the frequency for a nowcast in India is about every 3 hours.
Okay.
Mission Mausam aims to bring that down to just 1 hour.
Wow. I mean, if a flash flood is developing in a valley, a 3-hour window is an absolute eternity. People can get caught completely off guard. Roads can wash away. Shrinking that update window down to 60 minutes is literally real-time disaster management.
It saves lives, pure and simple.
But looking at the scale of this supercomputing effort, I do have to wonder how India's models fit into the rest of the planet, because weather doesn't just stop at the border. A storm brewing in the Indian Ocean or a cold front coming over the Himalayas changes everything.
Well, that interconnectedness is exactly why international linkages are baked into the core policy framework. There are planned collaborative research partnerships with global organizations like the World Meteorological
Oh,
Organization.
that's smart.
Yeah, India's domestic AI models will be digesting global climate data alongside their local sensor readings, so that ensures the system accounts for planetary shifts, not just domestic ones.
I noticed the deployment roadmap heavily targets the Northeast region first. That feels like a trial by fire, honestly.
Yeah.
You're taking this brand new AI supercomputing system and throwing it into the most chaotic, mountainous terrain in the country.
It is a challenge.
It's a place where devastating floods and landslides happen constantly. But I guess if it works there, it works anywhere.
The Northeast priority is really a strategic necessity driven by geography. Traditional broad-stroke weather models fail spectacularly in mountainous areas. Topography creates these extreme microclimates
Oh, so.
through a process called orographic lift. Basically, a massive storm can hit the windward side of a mountain range, dump all its rain, and leave the leeward side completely dry.
Ah, because the mountains themselves dictate the movement of the air and the moisture in real time. You can't just look at a satellite image from space and predict what that will do on the ground.
Exactly. So by deploying observation systems specifically tailored to that complex, hilly terrain, the initiative aims to model those physical interactions peak by peak.
Wow.
State governments will then integrate this hyperlocal data directly into their disaster management plans. That gives them the highly specific warnings needed to mitigate things like landslides and sudden river surges.
Okay, so building better radars and training AI models to understand mountains makes logical sense. But I want to pivot to the part of this roadmap that feels genuinely out of a science fiction novel.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
There is an entire pillar dedicated to weather management technologies. We are not just predicting the weather anymore. We are talking about manipulating it. The goal is actively managing fog, hail, and rain. I have to ask, how do you manage a hailstorm?
Right. It sounds wild. It relies on atmospheric interventions, most notably a science called cloud seeding. Think of a storm cloud as a massive airborne reservoir of water vapor that hasn't quite decided to fall yet. To force a cloud to drop its moisture before it turns into massive, crop-destroying hailstones, you fly specialized aircraft into the cloud and release specific aerosol,
Like what kind of aerosols?
things like silver iodide or potassium chloride.
And those chemicals act as little magnets for the water vapor, right? The moisture clumps onto the particles until they get heavy enough to fall.
You've got it. You are artificially providing condensation nuclei. By doing this strategically, you can theoretically induce rain in a drought-stricken area. Or, in the case of hail, you can force a storm to rain out prematurely before it develops the severe atmospheric updrafts that actually create the hail.
That is fascinating.
And similarly, fog management interventions are going to be crucial during Indian winters to prevent massive, costly disruptions to aviation and rail transport networks.
So if a destructive hailstorm is forming over a critical agricultural zone, the idea is to scramble an aircraft, seed the cloud, and essentially defang the storm. You turn it into regular rain before it shreds the harvest. That is a massive shift from playing defense to playing offense.
It really is. It represents a transition from bracing for the weather to proactively managing the environment to minimize economic disruption. But that kind of intervention requires a flawless foundational understanding of the atmosphere, which is exactly why the rollout is strictly phased. Phase 1, which runs through March 2026, focuses purely on expanding the observation networks. So getting the radars and automatic weather stations online and running simulation experiments.
Which means phase 2, starting in 2026, is when the heavy hitters arrive. The new satellites launch and the aircraft for cloud seeding are finally deployed. I mean, you can't manage what you haven't accurately measured first.
Exactly. The sequence is non-negotiable. The capacity building phase must validate the AI models before anyone starts deploying aircraft to alter local weather patterns.
Let's take a breath here and do a bit of a reality check. We have a 2,000 crore budget, AI supercomputers crunching petabytes of Doppler data, 15-day Panchaya-level forecasts, and literal cloud seeding aircraft.
It's a lot.
It sounds incredible on paper, but what actually stands in the way? Because nature famously doesn't care about our technological ambitions.
True. And there are immense friction points that could derail this. The first is just the sheer scale and geographical diversity of the subcontinent. Developing complex, region-specific AI models is a monumental task.
Yeah, India is huge.
You cannot use the same algorithmic assumptions for the arid Thar Desert that you use for the coastal plains of Kerala or the Himalayan foothills.
And we already established that climate change is scrambling the historical data.
Yeah.
So the AI is trying to learn and predict patterns that are constantly shifting underneath it. It's like trying to hit a bullseye that keeps relocating.
Yeah, rapid changes in global climate patterns make long-term prediction incredibly difficult. But beyond the software challenges, there's a massive physical hurdle, which is infrastructure gaps. There are vast remote areas that still severely lack basic observational infrastructure.
Right, the blind spots. If you don't have an automatic weather station in a specific rural valley, your supercomputer's output for that valley is basically an educated guess.
The AI model is entirely dependent on the quality of the ingested data. If you have a blind spot in your sensor network, you have a blind spot in your forecast.
Definitely.
Expanding that hardware network across rugged, rural, or inaccessible terrains presents a logistical nightmare. But, even if you solve the hardware problem, you run into the final and perhaps most difficult barrier of all.
Human behavior. This is what I keep coming back to. You can have Pratyush and me here crunching the numbers perfectly. You can have a flawlessly accurate 15-day forecast pushed out by the most advanced AI in the world. But if the end user doesn't get the message or just doesn't know what to do with it, the entire 2,000 crore system fails at the very last inch.
Oh, absolutely. This implementation gap is often the hardest part of any large-scale governance initiative. The rollout explicitly recognizes raising awareness levels as a critical challenge.
It has to be.
It's a massive undertaking to ensure farmers and rural communities can actually access and effectively utilize this forecast data.
Because if a farmer gets an alert on the Mausam app that a severe drought is coming, but they lack the financial resources to alter their irrigation strategy, or they just don't trust a smartphone app over the traditional methods their family has used for generations, the data is basically useless to them.
The transition from raw data to actionable intelligence is notoriously difficult. The government's plan involves disseminating user-friendly advisories through SMS, the Mausam app, and regional media, but it requires translating highly complex meteorological outputs into simple, actionable steps.
Right.
A chart showing barometric pressure drops means nothing to a local fisherman, you know. They just need to know if it is safe to take their boat out.
So, looking at the big picture here, Mission Mausam is far more than just a meteorological upgrade. It is essentially an umbrella model for national resilience. It's a fundamental shift in governance, treating the weather not as an unpredictable act of God we just have to endure, but as a critical data stream to be leveraged for agriculture, public health, urban planning, and transport.
Yes. By attempting to empower stakeholders from federal disaster management agencies down to the individual citizen in a rural panchayat, it represents a really bold attempt to secure the nation's economic and physical infrastructure against an increasingly volatile climate.
We asked you at the beginning of this deep dive to imagine a world where your community knew exactly what the weather would do, down to the hour. Mission Mausam is laying the high-tech groundwork for that exact reality.
It really is.
But it leaves us with something pretty profound to think about. As we transition from merely observing the weather to managing it, potentially using aircraft to alter where and when the rain falls, how will this reshape our fundamental relationship with the natural world? And crucially, as this powerful technology rolls out, what happens to the communities caught in the implementation gap? If one village is perfectly prepared for a flash flood because they got the nowcast, but the neighboring village still hasn't checked their phone, who bears the cost of that divide? We'll leave you to mull that over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.